What Did I Say with Dan Rothenberg.
We're here with Brad Baldridge. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can you tell us about your experience helping families budget for college?
All right. Yeah. So I'm a financial advisor by training. So I've been, got involved in financial planning in 96 or so. So it's been many years of that. And then about 2005, I started focusing in on college planning because as college planning was becoming a bigger piece of the family puzzle, I realized that there's lots of things that families can do. I got some training and learned a little bit more about how need-based aid and financial aid works and learned about scholarships and all the different pieces and realized that there was a specialty there that nobody was talking about. And so I kind of jumped in with both feet. It's something I really enjoy doing. And so since then, I've, directly helped probably more than 250 families figure out college from a, one-on-one, do this, do that, this is the aid, this is the loans, this is how it works, these are the school, and all the details. And I've been given, lots and lots of presentations. And then about 2015 or so, I launched a podcast where I started talking about all things college. So it's a big topic. I've got 160 episodes of talking about college and things related like testing and how do you apply and how do you write good essays. And, so I interview a lot of different experts on all kinds of things around loans, gap years, types of insurance, what to do, how to visit colleges, how to pick a major, how do you deal with an undecided student, all that kind of stuff is covered at the podcast and website. And then what I focus on personally is all this, I would tend to work with the parent.
Mm-hmm.
You tend to work with a student, and there's many different consultants out there that work with students.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the essay writing expert hopefully is helping the student write essays, not the parent, because that's not good.
We hope
if the parents are doing the application and doing the essay. So I tend to work with parents on how are we going to pay for this? How do we choose a good school?
Oh, wow.
What do we deal with as far as, okay, our students undecided, is that good or bad? Well, you can roll with it. It's neither good nor bad. It's just different. And maybe in some cases you're good, some it's bad, but kind of, well, what can we do about it? Or my student's not motivated. Should we hire a coach? And, what's the best ways to save? What about tax planning? Are there, will we qualify for more or less need-based aid if we do it this way instead of that way? Or what about merit aid and loans and, negotiating with the schools? And what do we do if, to be fair, if one kid goes to the expensive school, do we have to make it equal and give the other kids the same amount of money?
So it sounds like, sorry to interrupt, you're kind of a financial advisor plus. You kind of get in there, it's sort of hands-on, you get into the emotional component.
Yes.
Of the money and the college. And so for instance, when you talk about choosing the right school for your child, what are some factors that go into that beyond just finances?
Right. Well, again, choosing the right school is very much a financial decision. And even the non-financial parts are financial, because when you change schools or you drop out without a degree or whatever that might be, that's a very expensive mistake. Mm-hmm. So it's financial whether we like it or not, unfortunately. But to find the right school, it's, and this probably better than most, right? There's some kids that are academic champions already, right? And they're going to do great in college because they know how to do it. They're going to transition to college. They'll be just fine. But there's another group that maybe they learn hands-on and they wouldn't do so well in a college where they sit in the big lecture hall. They would be better off in a school that does a lot of lab stuff, or a school that offers a lot of co-ops where, some of the stuff you're doing is on the job training, or, so kids have different learning styles. So that might be a factor, or kids might need big or small. Some kids are like, oh, I need to go to that big school because I want to be in the football stadium with 50,000 of my closest friends cheering on the team, right? That's my goal with college. And then there's the challenge of, well, when you ask your typical 16-year-old, or 17 or 18-year-old, what are you looking for in a college? You're going to get a blank stare because they've never seen a college generally. When you say big or small, they don't know what that means. When they say, urban or rural, they don't know what that means. Near or far, I've had many parents say things like, when we drove 7 hours to get to the college, by the time we got there, the student already wasn't interested because they realized 7 hours is a long ways away.
Mhm.
And they, so it didn't matter how good the school was because they realized that they wanted to be closer to home. And other kids are just the opposite, right? When they realized that school was so close and they wanted to spread their wings and try something different,
forget
get
it.
out of town.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. And it's funny, you mentioned you sort of got into this in 1996. And I remember I was 1 year graduated from college. I lived in Michigan, and I remember there was bumper stickers you would see on people's cars. It said, my child goes to the University of Michigan, honk and throw money. Now, at that time, it was about $7,000 a year in tuition, and that we parents were complaining about it then. What is going on now? It's probably 400%-ish more.
Well, yes, it depends on the schools, right? So
Yeah.
the average state school right now is $27,000 per year, all in. So that would be tuition, room and board, books, fees, beer and pizza, the typical cost of a typical student. And that's a published number. All the colleges have to put that out there. The government is, trying to make it easier on families in some ways so that all the schools publish that. The average private school now is about 57,000. Again, tuition, room and board, books, fees, the whole cost. But state schools vary between about 20,000 in lower cost states up to about 35,000 in the higher cost states. Like UC Berkeley is 35, 38,000, and some of the New York schools are 30. And the more expensive states are in the 30s, low 30s, high 20s, all the way down to mid to low 20s. So just depending on your state. So that's kind of the first step, is to understand, well, what's available in my state? Because often that's the price to beat, so to speak. Well, I can go to my local state flagship school for this. Now, you may not get a lot of aid, which means you'll pay full price. But when you compare that to the private school down the street, that's 70,000. You say, I can go for 27 or 70. I think 27 looks better. But that's not the whole story, because a lot of the private schools are going to offer you scholarships. So if that private school offers you a $40,000 scholarship, and now it's, I can go to the local state school for 27, or I can go to this private school for 30. Now, a lot of parents look at that and say, you know what? Closest, the price is so close, it doesn't matter. We'll take the one that we feel is the better fit. And, and like here in Wisconsin, where I live, our flagship is University of Wisconsin-Madison, 40,000 students. It's a big place. It's a little intimidating. Lots of students look at that and feel it's not the right place, and they'd like to go to someplace smaller. And, and there are those options. And again, some of them are the private schools. So you can say, well, this one's a little smaller and more intimate and within striking distance of the same price. So we'll pick the one we like. Or maybe you don't, maybe it's based on your major, or maybe, again, Madison's too close. You want to get out of the state and go to some school cross country. There's different goals for different reasons. And that's, I think, part of the process but understanding that the published price is not what you're going to pay. It's going to be some sort of net price. And that net price could be drastically different than sticker price, or it could be, roughly the same, depending on the college and what types of scholarships. There's both academic and merit scholarships, and there's also need-based scholarships.
And what scholarships are you more likely to have at state school as opposed to private school?
I would say both of them are available in both places. So as an example, the very high-end schools are extremely generous. Stanford had a press release in the last 6 months or so that's essentially said, we've upped our aid again. We now say that college will be free for all families whose income is below $100,000. And when they say free, they mean zero tuition and zero room and board. So you might have to buy some books and a little bit of getting back and forth to school, and that's it. Other schools, the full ride is really just zero tuition. You still pay for room and board. So get, devil's in the details with that. And that's what essentially what Stanford said. If your income is below 150,000, they guarantee your tuition will be zero, but you may still pay some or all for room and board.
Okay, so if I'm going to Stanford, as long as I get in,
then that's the big one right there.
Right. So if I can just handle that.
To get into these highly elite schools, you got to be that rock star student. And even if you're the rock star student, that's no guarantee, because they've got 1,000 incoming freshmen and they've got 10,000 rock stars to pick from. They just can't take everybody. So Stanford's trying to build a class that meets all the various needs, right? They got to have the right diversity to keep that crowd happy. They got to have enough soccer players to fill the team. They got to have enough, tuba players for the bands and orchestras. They've got to have the political wonks, the followers, the leaders, all that stuff. And so they're building a class, and it isn't necessarily personal, right? Lots of people will say, well, my kid had perfect everything. And it's like, yeah, that's not what they're looking for. I mean, that'll
okay.
Right. They will consider you because you have perfect everything.
Right.
But that's not where they stop. After you have perfect everything, then they go on to say, all right, well, we've got room for one ice skater. And if your student happens to be a state champion ice skater, they're probably going to get accepted. Unless that year, one of the Olympians also applied. So the gold medal winner is going to trump your state champion. That's just the way it is. And their grades might not be as good, but they're a gold medal winner.
So is that where sort of the branding, find your brand concept comes in? Find your angle. Who are you? And
yes, for sure. Right. Yeah. So there is that challenge of, okay, how do you, and again, there's lots of concern about providing an essay that is a good reflection of the student, right? So it could be well written and the grammar's proper, but some of the goals around writing the best essays are making sure that it gives the admissions people a snapshot of who you are. Not just, like I said, check the boxes and have good grammar. That, again, that's a given. You got to check the boxes and have good grammar, and then have it meet other goals, right? Or your extracurriculars might be why you get in, or your athletics might be why you get in. But again, what box are you going to check for them? In other words, I'm going to be their soccer goalie. Well, guess what? You're probably going to get in because they need a goalie. If the coach likes you and you're the number one pick, you'll probably get in as long as you have reasonably good grades and everything else. Because the coach has a lot of pull, and he'll say, yeah, I know they don't have a perfect test score, but they're a really good goalie and I want them, and then it'll happen. But then when you move away from sports, now it's like, okay, well, this person has extracurriculars. What does that mean? Well, they were the football captain. Did they win the state championship while they were the football captain? Are they the state champion football captain and the son of a famous quarterback?
It's not necessarily he's going to play football at Stanford, but he has certain leadership qualities.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then again, there's various levels of leadership, right? I was in charge of our French club at high school. All right, that's leadership. But at a Stanford or these schools, they're like, well, who cares? There's a French club president at 2,000 high schools across the country. That's nothing special for us.
I work with some families who, let's say, their kids are just hitting the books as hard as they can and not quite getting the results they want, but they're really, really trying. Would you say a healthy perspective from a family like that might be to say, well, look, you're doing your best. Let's back up and see what other creative ways we can find to empower what comes natural to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key for a lot of families is there is the academic path that we all understand, but it isn't the only path. a lot of people had very strange paths to get there, but not always, right? Not to say that you couldn't become president of the United States by going to an elite college and doing the elite thing, right? That is how a lot of senators did do it. Not how all the senators did do it.
Because college is so expensive, people tend to value it based on where is it going to get you in your career.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, college is a place to grow up. College is a place. I look back, what was college to me? It was foreign study and it was friends.
Yes, absolutely. Right. I mean, right. So there is that balancing act of, there's a lot of platitudes out there. There's a lot of generalities, the whole idea that college is the ticket to the good life. Now that's been relatively debunked. It's getting expensive enough that it isn't an automatic, you by the time you factor in the debt that a lot of students might incur, but there's that group of parents and kids and even adults returning to school and whatever it is that say, at work, I can't get the next promotion without having a degree. So I guess I have to get the degree. And what's their goal? What's the cheapest, easiest way I can get the piece of paper? Because I know I can do the job and they know I can do the job. And they'll give me the job as soon as I have the piece of paper. So I don't need to learn anything. On the other end of that spectrum is lots of us learned a lot of great things, and that's very applicable to our job or very applicable to life in the college experience.
Oregon still seems like there's a pretty reasonable path to college for a lot of the kids I work with. U of O seems to require about a 3.3. Same with OSU. It's doable. There's the Oregon Promise Plan. You get two free years of community college, and then you transfer to the 4-year schools. But then there's California. No one can get into their state schools.
Oh, that's not true at all.
No? Oh, okay.
Right. You can't get into UC Berkeley, UCLA, or UC whatever famous school.
Yeah.
But what about Merced that nobody's ever heard of? Right? That one you can get into. Okay. But that's not the one people are wanting to get into.
Fair enough.
They want to get into UCLA because that's the one everybody heard of, right? So there's that exclusivity challenge that a lot of parents, we've got these 100 colleges that everybody's heard of that we want to put on our resume so that we can brag at the water cooler that my kid goes to name brand school.
And I think it also has to do with the child's motivation and whether it's about the child or the parent.
Right.
If a child has a dream of going to Stanford and they work their butt off for it, they're probably going to make the most of it. And that will be a really, really special stepping stone, as opposed to a child that, let's say, their parents have the means to get them into Stanford and they don't really value it much.
Right. Absolutely. And that's part of what the colleges are all about too, is they really want to take kids that will excel and kids that are a good fit and kids that will, right. They don't want to get the bad review. I went there 3 years and dropped out and it sucked. They don't want, that's not their goal any more than it's anybody's goal, right? They want to be able to say, we educated the next senator. We want to say, they want to say, right. All our kids get jobs when they're done. I can help parents figure out how to plan and pay for college, right? Big picture stuff of should we budget $100,000 for the local state school or $300,000 for the private school? Or maybe we can find a happy medium or get some scholarships, or maybe we only have 50,000, but I tend to work with parents.
And when do you begin that work? When does that start?
Ideally, freshman, sophomore year. Reality, junior, senior year.
Okay.
Because parents don't realize that they need to get to work earlier than they could.
Tell us a little bit about that. What parents need to know as soon as possible to wrap their arms around this.
Right. So we have the concept called early stage planning and late stage planning. So early stage planning is, well, I've got a grade schooler, a toddler, a middle schooler, or hey, we're pregnant. Let's plan for college. And that is again, it's mostly financial, type of planning and philosophy. What's our philosophy? We're going to pay for it all. We want our kids, our goal is to send them to Stanford if they want to go, or our goal is the local state school, or we don't value education. We don't care about it, or whatever. Right? Lots of points in between those comments, of course. And then the other one is, well, should we be putting $200 a month away for college or $400 a month away per student? Or when that depends on how much, again, what you can afford and that whole process. But then once you hit high school, now it becomes real. Now it's like, well, how are we going to pick the school? Let's visit schools. Let's do our testing. Student needs to figure out what they want to be when they grow up, so that they can pick a major, and are they math and science or liberal arts and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the loans and the need-based aid and the merit aid and the scholarships. And again, some families have a big pot of money, and now how do we use that efficiently? And other families, come to me and say, well, something happened in our past and we never got that savings done, or whatever, right? Sometimes they have an excuse. They wanted to do it, but they never did. And others said, we just didn't even know we should have done it. And, so here we are. We've got a junior, college is in 2 years. What do we do? How do we make this work? Now, the reality is, for most families, you could piece it together somehow.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be easy, but again, if you look at the typical college campus, it's full of students.
Yeah.
So it happens. Most people do it, but I think some people do it more efficiently than others. And I think that's the bottom line is, for a lot of families, if you do it with intention and plan well, it can allow you to do more. And that's just financial planning in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
The average person is going to earn whatever, $2 million in their lifetime, and they're going to spend $2 million in their lifetime. But if they do it efficiently, they can maybe do a little more with that, have slightly nicer vacations. And can we afford to spend $200,000 in education or $300,000? What is the impact? Will that impact my retirement? I had a dad, his daughter got accepted to the Tisch Performing Arts Center at NYU, very prestigious, right there near Broadway. She was a singer and dancer. She was excited to go. But NYU is $75,000. Now, she got a lot of good scholarships, so the net cost was $35,000. Well, Dad was looking at $35,000 times 4 years is $140,000 times 4 kids. Well, that's a big number.
Yeah.
And, if I commit to this, can I do it? And we ran the numbers and did the math. And it's like, well, he was on track to retire at 62 if he didn't spend on college, and he could retire at 64 if he did spend on college. And he didn't really have a retirement goal of he's thinking 65 or 70 anyway. So that was good news to him that he said, okay, we can do this. Now, we also talked about, but just because you spend $140,000 on one child, does he have to do it with all? Well, no, you don't have to. You may want to. Some parents say it's got to be equal in dollar amounts. Other parents say, some are going to help with education because that's what's the right path for them. Some of our other kids, maybe we'll help them start a business or buy their first home or get involved in rental real estate or do something else because college isn't their path.
I imagine there's a lot of parents who are living paycheck to paycheck, and it just feels too overwhelming budgeting or saving for college. Is there hope?
Well, yeah, like I said, everybody can figure it out. And that's, again, getting back to you can hire people to help you. I'm building some courses, and there's lots of free information out there, lots of information on my website. You can do it yourself, right? There's lots of people that do their own taxes, do their own investing, and can do their own college. They just got to learn a lot and then do it. There's lots of people that don't do any of those things and don't want to do any of those things. But I think it's the new reality of this is getting bigger and more expensive and more complicated, and therefore is demanding a lot more of our time and attention, right?
Yeah.
We pay for college with money, but we also pay for college with time and stress. And that's the big picture stuff. And then we can switch over to the strategic or the tactical, right? If I do this, right, I will get more need-based aid. If I do that, I will save on taxes, right? So there's a lot of tax breaks around college.
Yes.
As an example. So make sure you meet the rules so that you get them. And sometimes like a tax, there's the opportunity credit that phases out if your income's between 160 and 180 if you're married. So I was working with a family where they were coming in at 182. So we said, well, let's put more money in retirement. So we get the tax credit, $2,500 twice, 2 kids. All right. So now we get $5,000 for putting more into retirement. Plus we get the tax savings. But now they're saying, okay, now we can't afford to pay for college. We just took all the money we were going to spend on college and we stuck it into retirement. So then we borrowed it back out of retirement and paid the bills.
Mhm.
Now that worked for them. Am I saying spend your retirement money on college? No. I'm saying as a part of a greater plan, there's tactics that work for some all over the place, whether it's need-based aid, merit aid. For some kids, they're likely to get large merit scholarships at these types of schools. So maybe you should apply to these types of schools.
Right.
Because you're likely to, and those types of schools, like, great example. We just talked about Stanford saying, if you need it, they have it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But the student that can get accepted to Stanford, and let's say mom and dad, they have a big business or something and they make a lot of money or whatever, they're qualified for need-based aid.
Mm-hmm.
They're over the 150. Matter of fact, they're over 350, let's say. Stanford does not offer any sort of merit scholarship. So they apply to Stanford, they're guaranteed to pay full price.
Okay.
That same rock star student applies to a couple other schools where they offer merit scholarships. All of a sudden, that $75,000 school is 45 or 35 because merit aid was a reality.
So there's a lot
if you
of...
don't know that. You don't know that, again, every year someone will go argue with Stanford and say, well, I don't understand. My kids was fantastic. And these schools over here thought he was fantastic and gave him a bunch of merit aid. And then Stanford has to say, well, we don't offer merit aid.
Yeah.
And we've been very clear about that. It's all over our website. We've always said that. So I don't know what to tell you. We're sorry, but that's the way it is. And we're Stanford. And if you don't like it, then you can go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times those same parents will write the check begrudgingly because they don't want to pull the rug out from under their kid when they didn't realize that, they said any school will make it happen. And then at the 11th hour, they realized that it was a $300,000 commitment they made instead of $150,000.
Yeah. And it takes, so every school is kind of its own business and its own brand and its own entity. And it's up to us to learn about it. And like everything, it's more passwords we got to create and more, more we got to learn and more emails. But it sounds like the information is out there.
Yes. Right. Absolutely. Right. There's a lot, again, my website, we've got all kinds of scholarship guide for busy parents. We'll get you up to speed on that scholarship problem I just talked about. We've got the net price of college by income for each state. So you can literally pull down a chart that says, for this school, if your income is this, it will cost, on average, it costs this and this and this and this. And you can look at it and say, oh, look, this private school, if our income averages between 75 and 110, this private school is 28,000 on average. And the state school is 23,000 on average. So even though the list price is 30 and 70, the reality is 22 and 27 on average. Now, that's where you start. But then, of course, your family's not average. You're going to be above average or below average. And now that's your job to figure out is, I don't care what the average student pays. I want to know what I'm going to pay. And that's where now you got to devils in the details. And that's some of the things that I help families with is we can predict merit aid and need-based aid and costs at many colleges and try and figure out what the right path is. So that's another area that I help people with is, they get all concerned about this or that. And I say, well, that, you're never going to qualify for that. Just cross it off the list. Focus your time over here. This is where you'll actually get a payback for your efforts. Whether it's, again, saving and investing, scholarships, negotiating with schools, picking the right schools, et cetera, et cetera.
Brad, this has been enormously helpful. Tell us where to find you, your podcast, and all of your resources.
Right. Yeah. So tamingthehigh-cost-of-college.com is my website, and my podcast is by the same name without the .com. And you can get to the podcast there, but you can also, wherever you get your podcast. You can find Taming the High Cost of College, just search for it, and you can listen to it there, or you can listen on the website. But also on the website, we've got a free email newsletter where we send out, timely stuff like now is a good time to be visiting, don't forget, and that kind of stuff, as well as, these are tips and tricks and strategies, and here's college visits 101 and here's college visits 201 and that type of stuff. There's we just built our new need-based aid calculator. So we haven't talked much about this, but the whole need-based aid system is being revamped, starting with families that are applying this fall. So it's going to be different than what it was. So families that have some experience with it are going to be, oh no, this is all different. But obviously, there's a lot of families where they don't have any experience, so it's not going to be different to them. They just have to learn. But the important point there is they got to learn the new system, not the old system. So you got to pay attention, because if it's out on the internet for 3 years, it's stale and it's probably not accurate anymore. So they're changing the name from, as an example, from EFC, expected family contribution, to SAI, or student aid index.
Okay.
So if you see EFC, starting 6 months from now, it's not going to be called that anymore. So that's stale. That's something that somebody hasn't updated yet. And therefore I would take it with a grain of salt. But all that stuff, all that stuff, that's part of our newsletter, right? We're releasing the challenge that we have with it is the government says it's changing, and they've given us the broad parameters, and they've essentially said details to follow. So high school juniors right now are the guinea pigs.
Okay.
They're going to apply this fall, and they're going to attend a year and a few months from now, and they're the first ones under the new system. So
the new system of need-based aid,
new system of FAFSA and need-based aid. So I'm telling school counselors and anybody else that will listen that the word needs to get out that even if you were skunked and didn't get anything the last time you tried, either you got to understand the new rules and determine whether it's going to work for you or not, or just fill out the FAFSA, which might be easier, and see what happens.
Brad, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.